Hello everyone and welcome to Eternal Basics. My name is Pojo and today we're going to be focusing on the Firestarter deck. We're going to be building this deck up just a little bit, switching out some of the cards that we think are not particularly good, and then we're going to play a game with just the basic deck and demonstrate how it works and talk a little bit about aggression in decks and how that's an important part of Eternal as a strategy. The main focus of this particular video will be aggression, and specifically the concept, the basic rule of Eternal, which rule number 1 of Eternal is that if you reduce your opponent's life total to 0, you win. And this is a deck that's concerned primarily with that. So we're going to be talking about aggressive decks, and as we do, we're going to be building out this deck. And so let's take a quick look at it right now. So this is the basic Firestarter deck in all of its glory. You'll see I'm at 79 out of 75 cards, which isn't super, but everything else about it looks pretty good. It's got like a decent curve of stuff going on. You can see that it's very high on 1 and 2 drops, and that's fairly important for fire. Before we go into this, I am going to turn off advanced deck building. So just so you're aware, in preferences, there's an option that is called advanced deck building. And once you're feeling ready for it, you can enable this to show how much power you have and actually start messing with your mana base and power bases. So now we're just looking at just the cards. And this is what every new player sees when they're looking at this deck for the first time. Okay, so we're going to make a couple of substitutions, and these are the substitutions that I recommend for this deck in the order that I recommend overall. We're only going to be looking at common and uncommon substitutions, no rares, nothing special here. We're just going to be checking out what we can do to make this deck a little better on a very, very light budget. So first things first. Let's look at the cards that are really good and that we definitely want to keep. First off, we have Torches, which are a really, really strong red card. Very good for removal, good for dealing damage. This card is a big Swiss Army knife for you and one of the most powerful cards in red. Most red decks are going to want to run 4 Torches pretty much all the time, and this one's no exception. We have Oni Ronin, which is a really fine 1-drop with Warcry. This card tends to get a lot of advantage very early on. It's a really fast, efficient threat that also happens to give you some late game potential with the Warcries, which is kind of neat. We have Pyroknight. This is one of the only rares. I actually recommend bumping these up when you get the chance, but don't worry about it for now. This card is a simple 1-drop that also happens to have like a lot of late game potential, and that's pretty neat. Some other cards that are like really stand out here. General Izalio is not bad for getting us up in power. He's not like the greatest card in red. We've got some good removal in the form of Magma Javelin. Assembly line's very strong. And a couple of these others are looking pretty good. So some of these cards are definitely cards that we're always going to want to keep. However, there are a couple of stinkers in here as well. So the first one is Hellhound Yearling. Hellhound Yearling is a card that exists primarily to make other cards look good. I actually had to recraft these because I disenchanted all of mine. Yeah, so this one is a 1/1 that deals 1 damage to the enemy player, and this is the first card I recommend taking out of the deck. So we're going to cut all 4 of those, and instead we're going to add in a card that does the same thing that Hellhound Yearling does, but a little better. That card is Ticking Grenadin. So this card is not quite the same. You have to actually get it killed to have it deal the extra damage to the enemy player, but the extra damage that it does is 3 instead of 1. So that's actually really pretty beneficial, and since this card is always going to be attacking, it tends to put a lot of pressure on your opponent. This is just a little bit more value in the 1 slot, and overall I think you're really going to be happy with this change. Okay, secondly, we have Pyre Adepts. These cards are a little bit boring. It's not really all that bad statted a card, but it's something that I kind of want to get out of here just because it's not particularly strong. You're not going to see it once you start getting up to some better 2-drops. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this, and we're going to up the number of Oni Ronins in the deck. Alright, so yeah, Oni Ronin is a really, really strong 1-drop. Having 4 of any type of card makes it much more reliable that you'll get that card, and getting an Oni Ronin on turn 1 is really, really strong for a red deck, so we're going to go ahead and pop those out and put the Ronins in. Okay, so next up we have Centaur Outrider. Centaur Outrider is a 4-drop, 5/2. The stats on it aren't particularly good. It's really, really easy to kill, and then it just doesn't do much. Most of the time it gets blocked and then it trades and dies. It doesn't actually do the damage that you want it to do. So we're going to go ahead and cut this out, and this is the first time that we're going to put something in that's actually outside of our curve. We're actually going to lower the curve a little bit and put in a few more piercing shots. So that's a simple uncommon, pretty easy to purchase. Another option here that is pretty good is Ornate Katana, which we might include as well. Actually, let's include that since it's a common. That'll make it a little bit cheaper and easier to put in. Okay. Next up, we have Dusthoof Brawler. This guy is a little bit... He's got some of the same problems that the 4-drop we just deleted has. He's somewhat aggressive, but he's also a little too easy to deal with, so we're going to cut him out and try to make our deck a little bit more aggressive again. And this time, we're going to do it by increasing one of the more beneficial cards in the deck, Assembly Line. Alright. And let's see here. My final substitution, and this one's actually not all that necessary. These Oni Strikers are a pretty reliable damage dealer. They're actually not a terrible card, but we're going to replace them with a better 2-drop. One of the best 2-drops in the game, Rakano Outlaw. So this is an uncommon that you should be looking at for crafting at some point. Alright, finally, we're going to substitute one of these Flash Fires for a Flame Blast. This is more or less... your choice. Flame Blast and Flash Fire do very similar things. Flash Fire is a card that always casts at 5 power but can deal variable amounts of damage. Flame Blast is a card that can be cast at variable powers, so it can be cast as early as 3 in mono red, but it's actually a little bit... It does basically the same thing. It can be a little bit less useful than Flash Fire at the higher levels because you have to spend all of your power to get that damage, but the fact that it's usable in the early game is actually pretty relevant and beneficial, so we're going to actually put in 2 of those. And in order to put in 2 of those, I'm actually going to take out one of these big drops here, the Steelbound Dragon. We're not going to mess with the deck's curve too much. Normally, if you're playing a really aggressive red deck, you might consider getting rid of several of these 6 drops and maybe just moving the curve all the way down so that you have 1 through 5. But we're not going to do that for now. We're just going to play with a slightly upgraded version of this deck. Okay, so that's our Firestarter. Alright, let's get this thing into a game. Now you'll hear a lot of talk about card advantage and card efficiency, and those are important concepts in Eternal, but if you're playing something that's very aggressive, you actually sometimes don't need to care about card advantage, and what you're really looking for is mana efficiency, or power efficiency, and basically the ability to reduce your opponent down to 0 as quickly as possible. What we're trying to do is establish an early advantage such that we always have the advantage during the game, and sometimes we can end the game before our opponent can do anything special. Let's go ahead and throw down an Oni Ronin. Alright, so already we're playing on curve, and we've played out a 1-power creature. A lot of decks don't have 1-power creatures, and this deck is no exception. As you can see, it's already running out something that's making it so that it can't actually play anything on turn 1. That means we get some free damage and a free war cry immediately. And that's what aggression is all about, that early advantage leading into, hopefully, a cascading win. So we're going to go ahead and attack for 2 here. Now, I can play Ornate Katana on my creature, and I could have done that at the beginning of the turn, but instead what I want to do is develop the board a little bit and spread out a bit more, so we're going to play down Rakano Outlaw. Now, once again, we have this nice, efficient play, where we're playing cards on our curve, or what we call our mana curve, and that essentially means that we're just always playing all of our mana as efficiently as possible. All of our power as efficiently as possible. I apologize. It is power and not mana. Alright, let's go ahead and attack there. Okay, so that's 4. I made a mistake there, actually. I should have put the Ornate Katana down on one of these creatures before I attacked. And yeah, that was my bad. I missed 2 points of damage, and in aggressive decks, the damage that you miss can be extremely relevant to whether or not you're going to win. Alright, so we don't have any more drops that we can play, and that's pretty unfortunate for us, but we're still attacking for 6 a turn, and my opponent's still got a very, very slow deck going on. So whatever he's doing, he's going to want to do it soon. But I've already got some interesting ways that I might be able to kill him. Alright, so we're going to see what he plays out. Alright, he's got a Plague. That's going to slow me down a little bit by getting rid of my Oni Ronin. but overall it looks like he wants to be left alone until he gets to play his big creatures. This might be a Witching Party deck, something that wants to play some cards at 6 that are really going to wreck my day. So we're going to go ahead and tack in here. And here's something interesting that we're looking at. See, we have 5 damage here already. We've got another 6 if we use Rampage. So this might be the turn that we use Rampage, just because this Rakano Outlaw could get removed and we won't get another opportunity. So let's go ahead and do that. Swing in for 6. And normally you wouldn't use a trick like this, but as you can see, when my creature gets removed like that, we actually managed to use our card pretty efficiently. And now we've got some cool stuff going on. So this 8/8 Outlands Sniper is a really good card, of course. It's a lot of fun. It's really going to do a ton of damage to my opponent, but I actually have a better path to victory here. If I play out Outlands Sniper, there's a good chance that it gets removed by a spell, and therefore I'm not actually going to get through for the 6 damage that I need. I could play Outland Sniper and do 2 damage to my opponent's face, which is not a bad plan. I actually really like that line of play, but I think the thing that I want to do even more here is play Stone Scar Maul. And we're just going to get rid of this 2/2 and deal 4 damage to his face with the Overwhelm from the Stone Scar Maul. Now my opponent's at 4, which means that I have him dead next turn if I play the Flash Fire. Now he's drawing his cards. He wants to play out a Witching Hour at some point, but it looks like he doesn't quite have what he needs to do it. So as a result, I'm going to win the game. I just get to Flash Fire his face, and voila, that's it. So that's the basic idea behind aggressive decks. You play cards so fast that your opponents can't necessarily use the massive advantage that they have. As you can see, my opponent actually had 5 or 6 cards in his hand, and he had some cards that were actually maybe better card quality than mine. That particular deck uses cards like Champion of Cunning and Witching Hour, and it isn't really all that good against threats that happen early. Aggressive decks can really take a lot of games, and they're a pretty good way to start out when you're just starting out with a simple Pauper deck. There's a rule in games that was originally coined by Day 9 that I've always really liked, which is that if your opponent is ever doing something weird or strange or unusual with his deck, with his strategy, where he's just sort of fiddling around and not necessarily you're not really sure what he's up to, just go kill him. If your opponent's trying to do all of this stuff that's expensive or slow, if he's trying to do something that actually takes a lot of time to set up, then the easiest solution is to just go and finish him off. And that's one of the things about red decks that makes them very simple and very easy to play. As such, starting with Firestarter is a pretty good way to get a basic handle on Eternal and the basics of the game. It does one thing well, and that is damage. So, in general, I think you should give this deck a shot when you're starting out, and then start to think about what you want to build out from there. If you like the aggressive strategy, there are some really good choices that you can make here. One of the things you can do is you can cut off the 6s and 8 drops and start doubling down on the more aggressive stuff. You can add things like Burn Out, which is a really aggressive way to finish off an opponent by sacrificing small tokens, so you could up the amount of Grenadin drones. You could add more rallies, which is a really good way to basically just send a bunch of tokens in and do stuff like that. You could go for a more spell-focused strategy, and you can focus more on the flash fires and the flame blasts. And if you have some stuff like that, you have a really good way to end the game out very quickly that way. All of these are really good strategies for mono red decks to finish off your opponent very quickly. And in general, when it comes down to it, if you're playing games against people who care a lot about card advantage, who care a lot about their really valuable creatures, who have really high card quality because they have all of the legendaries and all of the rares, these decks are usually going to get you somewhere on the ladder. As a result, they're pretty good to pick, and they're a lot of fun to play. It's pretty nice to be aggressive sometimes, and I think that in general you might enjoy this. Join us next time. We're going to be looking at the Justice decks. Feel free to like or subscribe if you like. I'm super happy if you do. And yeah, I I hope you'll see us next time. We're going to look at the Justice deck next. At some point, we're probably going to look at putting decks together to make even better decks using hybrid decks. So that's the basic plan for the series so far. Have a good day, and good games to you all. Cheers!